start by giving a little bit of an overview of who I am and what I do, and then we can get right into any questions anyone has about hiring remotely. Feel free to add questions in the chat window there, everyone, as they come to you. So my name is Dee. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Boundless. And at Boundless, we're helping companies to solve the challenges of employing people internationally. So some of you watching today may have some direct experience of this. For some of you, you might be very new to this, but it can be difficult. It can be quite painful trying to hire people remotely across borders and get to grips with all of the employment regulations and the tax regimes of these other countries. And that was something that I experienced myself directly. I spent 10 years in COO roles with B2B SaaS companies. And during that time, I oversaw distributed teams and took care of setting up employment and payroll and so on for many different countries. And it just struck me as completely crazy that it was so painful, particularly when we were seeing such an acceleration in remote work. And we know that really awesome people live all across the world, and companies want to find the very best people, and they want to keep those people, and they want to have happy people. And it was very evident long before the current COVID situation that remote work and people working from anywhere for any company based anywhere in the world was not just the future, it was happening. It was very much the present. So we're very, very focused on making this accessible for any company, even smaller companies where the challenges of dealing with the complexity of this might have previously been a barrier. We want to make this really easy for them.
That sounds great. That sounds amazing. We keep saying that remote work is the future. The future of work is remote, but it's no longer the future. It's here and it's happening. And we need to have it taken care of. We're glad Boundless is one of the companies who are trying to solve this problem.
It's certainly not a new problem at all. Mm-hmm. And the acceleration of remote work was at rocket ship speed even prior to what we've seen over the last couple of months. And this has just been a massive accelerator for that. So the appetite's really there.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to go to our first question. Mm-hmm. And the people in the chat, you can go ahead and start sending your questions over as well if you have any. The first one that we have is, we want to be fully distributed. Our teams will be mobile and won't have a permanent address mostly. How do we accommodate that?
Really interesting question. And I was actually talking to someone about this very problem this morning. Someone you know, June, actually. It's a really, really good question. I think sometimes I think people running companies often understand that there are responsibilities around the tax situation, particularly. I think sometimes at an individual level, people are under the illusion that if they keep moving, they don't need to pay any tax anywhere. That's not really how the world works. But for most countries, if you're in a country for more than 183 days in the year, so for more than half the year, that country will consider you to be tax resident in that country, or certainly you would have some tax obligations in that country. If people are in a country, if you're moving around and you stop somewhere for 3 weeks and then you move on to somewhere for 2 weeks, that's not a problem. You won't have tax obligations in that country. It's where there's a longer stay. And it is really important for any employee to have their tax residency figured out. And as an employer, you can't feign ignorance on this stuff. You need to have oversight of it. You need to understand where your people are. But so long as you can come to an arrangement where each individual spends a certain amount of time in a country of their choice, it would need to be something that works for you as an employer too, each year, and they make that their tax residency, and they're fully registered with the tax authorities there. that's fine, that works. Now, as an employer, you need to be registered with the tax authorities in that country also. So as an employer, you always have an obligation to pay employer taxes and to pay employee taxes on your employees' behalf in the country that they're tax resident in. And then that individual will also be entitled to employment rights. So they are inherently connected things, but they are two different things that you need to look at. Number one, the tax regime and your ability to submit filings and make payments to the local tax authority. Secondly, what are the employment rules in the country that this person is ordinarily resident in? And that can be very straightforward if it's a country where you have lots of other employees, perhaps you have operations established there, you may have offices there, you may have an entity registered there, then that's really straightforward. Where it becomes more difficult is where it's a country where perhaps as a company, you don't have any other connection to that country, or you have a couple of people there working as independent contractors for you, but you're not set up as an employer. So that's when working with a company like Boundless, a PEO, as it would be known in the US, a professional employer organization, or an EOR, employer of record, as it's known in Europe. It's important to work with an organization like that then to support you with taking care of all of this compliance. I do see someone in the comments saying that they can't see or hear us. Can you see and hear me okay, June?
I can hear you okay. Maybe okay. Patricia, you can try to refresh the page and see if that works. Is everybody hearing us okay?
Okay, so other people can see and hear. Okay,
very good.
Okay. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, June. Do you have any? Do you need any other clarity on that? Or do you think I should expand on any of that?
No, that's actually it's a really very detailed explanation, and I'm quite sure this goes both ways on the employees and the employer side. For you as an employer, you need to be responsible, exactly what you said. You need to be responsible with, that your employees are legally doing their taxes, their social securities, and, all of the things that protects them, and have them as registered taxpayers of whichever country that they select in.
Something else I might mention there as well. Different countries have double taxation treaties with each other. It's getting more complex on the tax side, but sometimes that can be a solution as well. If people are moving around quite a bit, sometimes you can take, as an employer, the employee needs to make the arrangement with the local tax office, but that can sometimes help the situation. You would need to talk to a specialist accountant about that. It's a little complex. It's not hard work, but it's, a specialist would need to advise you on it.
Something very specific. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I think that answers the question. Let's move on to the next one. Do you offer employee liability insurances? Are you the ones negotiating this? And I think this is what brought me to you also. And I should have asked you. I knew you were working on this, and I posted this on Twitter. But yes, does Boundless offer employee liability insurances, or are you the ones negotiating this with somebody, a third-party insurance company that offers this to the employees?
So employee liability can mean slightly different things in different countries. So some governments will have a scheme that essentially operates as a tax scheme, where as an employer in a country, you are obliged to contribute to that scheme and pay these taxes. And it's an insurance, but it's treated as a tax in terms of the filings and so on. And in that case, Boundless, for example, we act as the legal employer on behalf of our customers. So we take care of all of the admin and all of the legalities, so our customers can just focus on an awesome working experience for the employee and focus on that relationship, and the customer can focus on growing their own business. So in those countries where there is a requirement by the government for an employer to contribute to a scheme like that, Boundless takes care of that. In other countries where it's not a tax as such, then ordinarily a company can, under their regular insurance schemes, so this would be a company might have an employer's liability scheme for their regular employees. They can actually cover everyone that's working for them internationally under that scheme. Now, I can't speak on behalf of every insurer everywhere in the world. Of course, you would need to check with your insurer, but certainly I've worked with insurers in the past, and these would have been the kind of major gold standard insurers that provide these types of policies. And I've had direct conversations with them, and it's quite standard for them to cover that under their policies, and they can very comfortably cover people in other countries also. Of course, you need to let them know what those countries are. I've generally been hiring people in the US and in Europe, and I haven't had any issues. It may be that there are some other countries that are a challenge, but it's always worth talking to your insurer. In my experience, it has not been difficult or expensive to get extra people in other countries added.
Right. I think that does answer the question. Thank you. Let me move to the next one. Our team members are nomads and don't stay long in one area. Taxes and Social Security are tricky. How do we manage that? I think you've answered this.
Yeah, I mean,
earlier
it is
before.
Tricky. It is tricky.
Right.
The world we live in was not built for digital nomads. Governments struggle to deal with this. There is no harmonization across tax regimes across different countries. People often believe that there is in Europe, that there isn't. Governments don't really talk to each other about this stuff. So right now there isn't any kind of a system in place where you can go online and say, I was in Spain for 2 weeks this month, and then I was in France for 3 weeks, and submit it and have taxes distributed that way. That doesn't exist right now. So yeah, I think it's what we covered earlier. People need to pick a country that they're tax resident in, that they have an association with, and pay their taxes through there. Where you may have challenges, if someone's a digital nomad and they are moving, then that there aren't going to be any conflicts with that particular tax residency. Where as a digital nomad, they stop and spend a little over 6 months in some other country, then that there could be some questions asked about that, and there might be a requirement to do some tax filing in that country. But as I said before, a lot of countries have double taxation treaties. So if the country that they've chosen to be tax resident in has a taxation treaty with this other country where they end up spending more than 6 months, it may be quite straightforward to resolve that using an accountant who has experience in that space.
Right. Just to add into this though, and this was a conversation I had with somebody a long time ago, and now it's just coming back to me, with regards to Social Security and, getting those Social Security services. For example, I'm a citizen, a European citizen here in Portugal, and I pay my taxes here and I have my Social Security here, all of the legal stuff. But then I decided to let's say I decided to live in Bali 6 months, or let's say 5 months, right? 4 or 5 months a year, like 2 months, 2.5 months earlier in the year, and then a few more months later in the year when it's colder. But and then I get sick and I need to claim my services regarding health and all of the stuff that you normally get for Social Security services. It does get tricky that way because from what I understand, I have to go back to Portugal to be able to claim those. I wouldn't be able to continue living elsewhere if I get sick, right?
Yeah, again, it would come down to the agreement between those countries. Mm-hmm. So within the EU, for example, if you're a citizen of an EU country and you've been paying your taxes in that country and you're visiting another EU country, you are entitled to the same healthcare that a local person is entitled to in that other EU country. That was, I guess, one of the kind of pretty important fundamental rights offered to EU citizens when the EU was founded. And there are some other, there are some agreements between different countries, but it's very country specific. It makes sense to check this out. An alternative, of course, is to have private health insurance, but do bear in mind that when you look at the social security net in general, not just healthcare, you will only be entitled to claim from the country where you've been paying taxes, and ordinarily, a government will expect that you be living in the country. Mm-hmm. So we have seen a situation over the last couple of months where a lot of people have ended up out of work, and governments are supporting people financially. But of course, if you haven't been on the radar of that government and paying taxes in that government, in that country for quite some time, quite often a government will say that you don't qualify for those types of payments. Mm-hmm. So it's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the way we are right now, where people are jobless and the government is supporting, giving some.
Yeah, I think stability and security is something that's always been important to people to varying degrees, and it's interesting. It often depends on where you came from or where you grew up, and how much stability and security was afforded to you by the government of that country. It can also depend on the stage of your life. It can be a lot more important to people with children, for example, or people that have specific healthcare requirements. But I think for a lot of us, our attitude to security and stability has shifted a lot in the last few weeks. And the ability to access government supports, access the right healthcare, it's pretty important. So when you make a decision about going to work for a new employer, or when you make a decision about settling in a specific country, these are things to bear in mind. And as an employer, as a company looking to attract awesome talent, retain the great talent that you have, and also make sure that you do have an ethical obligation to make sure that your workers are happy and safe and secure. And considering all of this, and considering what that looks like over the next 12 months and 24 months for your team is a really serious responsibility.
Yeah, and I think just with the survey that we did in Portugal, like 80% of the people who wants to work remotely actually wants remote employment, and remote employment translates to security, a steady paycheck, benefits, and all of the things about taxes and social security are taken care of. So yeah, as a company, I think this is something that we should really consider. We do have a question from Zaina. Is it okay if I'm going to invite her on screen to clarify her question. The question is, to what extent does Boundless protect the employer against getting sued? But I think I need a bit of clarification. Sued for which, instances, or what kind of situations it would be. Inviting her over. Oh, she's not responding, but maybe we can answer her question.
This is quite an important area. Of course, one of the reasons a company would use an organization like Boundless is to mitigate risk. Employing people is inherently risky. Employing people in countries where perhaps your team doesn't have any prior understanding of the tax regime and the legal system in that country, and you're not familiar with the employment regulations of that country, that's risky and it's scary. I've been there. I've done this for many countries in the past, and I often say that the problem that we're solving is fear, because it's that uncertainty is very intimidating. And what people want and need is a solution that solves that by giving them assurances, and that minimizes that risk and reduces the risk for them.
Mm-hmm.
So what Boundless does is we ensure that as a company, as an employer, you're fully compliant with all of the local employment regulations, and you're paying all of the taxes that you should be paying in that country. And as we act as the legal employer on behalf of our customers, we are assuming quite a lot of risk there. We take on a lot of that risk. So under our terms with our customers, it's really clear that the responsibilities we take on are around ensuring that the employment agreement is compliant with all local employment regulations, that we're giving you the right advice, guidance, and support to make sure that you're aware with everything that you need to do to be a compliant employer in that country. We're responsible for filing all of the taxes, making sure that the payroll calculations are all correct. We submit all of the tax filings. We take full responsibility for this. And we take full responsibility for making sure that the employee is paid the correct net amount on time. And then where our customers' responsibilities come in is they will bear the cost of, say, any extra costs associated with a termination of an employee. We will take the risk around giving them the advice and guiding them as towards how to handle that termination. And provided a customer follows all of our advice, that would be our risk. But where a customer decides to deviate from that advice and doesn't follow the official processes and procedures that are required for that country, then that customer would have to take on any costs associated with that. So if they were found to be in breach of the regulations, despite our advice that was compliant with the regulations, then they would need to bear the costs of any fines or penalties for breaching those regulations. But when the trickiest aspect and where the biggest risk is really around terminations, but it's very process driven, and it's very, very clear what needs to happen in those situations. And we have the right experts to provide full advice on that for all of the countries we support. Hopefully that's clear. But if you need any clarification on that, or if you have any other questions, please just post some extra information in there.
Yeah, that's true. I think this does answer the other question also. If there are issues with the contract and the talent has to file complaints about benefits and such, will it be against the company or against Boundless who provided the contract? So I'm guessing it's going to be against...
Yeah, generally, I mean, anything that's relating to the actual legalities of employment, Boundless takes care of that. But if, for example, there was a situation where it was around the company and how the worker was treated by the company, then there would be some liability on the company side. Different countries do have different regulations around this. So in some countries, Boundless as the employer of record is viewed as the full employer and has pretty much has full risk. And in other countries, governments would look at it and say, well, the company that the individual is working for also has some responsibility. We help our customers to fully understand that risk when they're employing someone in a country.
All right. Thanks. And I think this also answers the next question, which is Boundless a PEO, professional employer organization, which means Boundless is a co-employer, or an employer of record, which means the contract issued to the talent is from Boundless. Therefore, he or she is an employee of Boundless.
Yeah, so we're an employer of record. So PEO, professional employer organization, is the terminology most commonly used in the US, and it describes the type of company that Boundless is. And employer of record is the model under which we operate. So we are a PEO. We act as the employer of record. So yes, we're the legal employer for the workers, and that's how we're able to take care of all of this on behalf of our customers. This is how a customer can get set up to employ someone in a new country within minutes, where if the customer was to go the direct route and register with the local tax authorities themselves, find a local employment lawyer to produce a local employment agreement, get their heads around the local employment regulations, and take care of all of the ongoing payroll processing, tax filings, annual filings, and so on themselves, just to get set up to do that first month's payroll. For most countries, it will take maybe 4 or 5 months. It can take up to 18 months. It takes a really long time, and that's 18 months of pain and hassle and grief. It's a lot of over and back between lawyers, accountants, government offices, getting documents notarized. It's a very involved process to get this all in place. So operating that employer of record model is what allows us to take care of all of this on our customers' behalf and reduce their risk. From a worker's perspective, from the employee's perspective, I know prior to founding Boundless, I had sometimes employed people under PEOs, and quite often those workers totally understood the situation. They wanted to work for our company. They knew it was a company based out of their home country, and that they were very, very happy to work under this, because it meant they got all of the rights of an employee. They were paying into the local social security system, and they had all of that security and stability. And from their perspective, the only 2 times that the individual employee deals with Boundless is the point at which they sign their employment agreement and each month when they get their payslip. So other than that, our customer, the company, owns that relationship with the employee. Mm-hmm. And the customer allocates all of their work, manages their performance. If they have any HR issues or problems, they would go to the company that they work for. And then the company can come to us and ask questions if the issue relates specifically to an employment regulation in that country. But from the worker's perspective, there isn't, it's a very low friction point in terms of having this third party involved in their employment, and they understand that it's about giving something to them and providing value to them rather than it being a problem or a challenge.
Right. Okay, I think that does answer the question. You have another one. What are the challenges you've encountered so far working with companies hiring remotely?
Oh, that's a big question. Probably lots that we could go into there. Challenges, there's a broad array of challenges. So I think, if we start, first of all, if we look at the hiring life cycle, from first of all deciding you want to fill a role to onboarding that worker, there are quite a number of steps there. I don't hear people talking about sourcing talent being an enormous problem. I think there's just so much talent around the world. And I know I've often sourced talent from many different countries, and I've never had a huge problem with that, or it's certainly not a problem we hear a lot about. I think a lot of companies right now are new to a remote interview process. Even at Boundless, we have a distributed team, but for all of our hires, we would have met people at least once before hiring them. Sometimes they'd fly to us, or we might have been somewhere attending a conference and they would come and meet us there. We just made it work. We'd always get one face-to-face meeting in. Obviously, that we've someone starting with us on Monday who's just been through a recruitment process with us that was entirely remote. If you're going to be running a remote team, and if this person is going to be remote from you permanently, you're going to need to have really great processes and best practices around managing this person as a remote worker. And I think if you're doing that, then recruiting remotely shouldn't seem intimidating, because you apply that philosophy to the recruitment process. If, for example, your team does a lot of asynchronous communication, have that as part of the interview process. If you use a lot of video, you might ask the person to record answers to a few questions and send them over to you via video, or you might ask them to produce some documentation, or contribute to something that your team are working on in a collaborative way, that can be a really good way to see what working with this person remotely would be like. So that's the actual recruitment process in terms of interview stage. And then, I mean, given where we are, we tend to talk to people when they're at the next stage. So the people that we talk with tend to be in two categories. Either they've been through this recruitment process and they have someone that they want to employ and they're about to make an offer to, or else they will already have people in a few countries who are working for them as independent contractors. We see this quite a lot. And often these companies will know that it's not compliant to have these people working as independent contractors long term. Sometimes they've been looking for a solution for a little while. So there are two different challenges, I guess. In the first instance, it's a problem that they need to solve very, very quickly. Because if you're making an offer to someone, generally you want to be in a position to onboard them and pay their payroll within the next month to 2 months. There isn't usually a very long lead time there. So that's where a PEO can be really, really helpful. And I have heard of a lot of companies in the past making offers, and then as a next step, they go and look at the employment regulations of that country, or look at how they're going to take care of processing payroll for that country and filing taxes. And I have heard of companies who have ended up having to retract offers once they start to uncover the complexity of taking care of that themselves. And so often that's why a company will look at a PEO, because it's the quick, straightforward solution to solving the problem. And then the people in the other camp, the people who have independent contractors that they want to convert to compliant employees, the problem they're looking to solve is a little different. They will often have a situation where they have full-time compliant employees, maybe out of their HQ country. They might all be co-located at a head office or something like that. And those people are often internally in an organization will be viewed, or the remote workers will look at it as if those people are treated as first-class citizens, and the remote international workers are treated in some way as second-class citizens. So the people at the HQ country get all the benefits, they get all the perks, they're getting the employment rights afforded to people in their home country. And then the remote workers will have a contract that's very easily terminated. They won't be getting employment rights. They won't always have access to benefits or perks. And that can create a certain level of toxicity in a culture. It brings us back to that issue of security and stability that we talked about before. You know, many humans crave that, they always have done, but that's a lot more acute right now. People really want that. So the people that we're talking to, that's the problem they're looking to solve. They're saying, how can we make these people who are currently independent contractors feel really valued, feel like an equal member of the team, so that everyone is on the same footing, everyone is given the same rights. How do we give them access to things like pensions and healthcare? And provide that security and stability while also managing the risk of the company and making sure that the company isn't in a position where it's breaking any laws and at the risk of being fined for being non-compliant. So they're probably the key problems and challenges. And then, of course, there's onboarding, getting people immersed in your team, getting them to understand the culture, getting them to know their teammates. All of that's a bit easier when you bring people together. If you can bring them, if you have some co-located members, if you can bring this new joiner to wherever the co-located team are based and immerse them in your culture, that's kind of a quick, easy win. None of us have that option available to us right now, so we're all having to figure out remote onboarding. But if your organization is set up to support remote work and you are implementing best processes around remote work, that really shouldn't be a challenge. Our new joiner that we have with us next week, we've already booked in a series of meetings for him with different members of the team. We have a really clear team handbook he'll get on Monday morning when he starts, and that will outline how we communicate with each other, what tools we use, what the expectations are in terms of response times, and the styles that we use for communication. And yeah, that's the other. It's not a problem that we are solving directly at Boundless, but one I hear about is this cultural aspect of making remoters and co-located workers feel as one.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because so previously I worked full-time for a company in the US, but as a contractor. So I was an employee, but wasn't really an employee. Like, I was managing several teams for that company, and I was in the operations team as a manager. But then you would still feel that you don't belong, because you don't get the same benefits as the employees on site, or the employees in the US, because they have their insurances, they have their pensions, they get bonuses, and all of the perks, all of this stuff. And you, as somebody who is managing these people, you don't get any of those. There are some forms of compensation, of course, but it's still different. And I also have heard of this from other people, wherein they put a clear divide between, these are our full-time employees and these are our contractors. And us mentally, they were probably not thinking of it, it's that big of a deal, but it does give that divide in there, right? That subconsciously separating the full-time employees who have contracts and benefits and whatnot, and the company is legally binded to them, and then the contractors who can be easily replaced and let go if in case the company should need to eliminate or shed off some of the employees.
Yeah, and that divide's very real, and it feels like a huge gulf if you're the person on the outside. I think employers are acutely aware of this now, and we hear about this all the time from COOs and heads of people, so from the people who are making decisions around this stuff. And I think the reason it's come much more to the surface as a problem, because I think a couple of years ago, companies had small numbers of people remotely. And quite often those remote hires were not necessarily in senior roles. They weren't necessarily in leadership roles. So what you just described, June, where you said you were managing teams for this company, that's becoming a lot more common. That people who are in management roles, in leadership roles, people in really important creative roles, they're remote to the head office. And, I think as we progress and evolve as humans, and as the way of work evolves and progresses, more and more and more, we all understand the value of team and the value of great talent and great workers. And we understand the value of those people being happy, feeling valued and respected. And you've had that upsurgence in awareness and consciousness of that, at the same time as having more and more people being remote, and those roles being more and more senior and influential and important from a strategic perspective for the organization. So leaders in these decision-making positions are starting to say, this is a really big problem, and it's a problem we want to solve. We want to find a solution for this. Whereas, a few years ago, it was a smaller number of people, perhaps a blind eye was turned to it, or companies would think, oh, we'll figure it out later. I think now companies know they need to take care of this.
Yeah, that's true. Because before you were the exception. So they kind of position you that we want you in our team, but unfortunately we cannot hire you as one of our, because you don't live here, right? So for us to still keep you, we will give you this type of compensation, but you're still not really part of the company. And the security in there is also, it's not there, basically.
But I think what was also happening a few years ago was remote jobs were thin on the ground. So if you wanted to be a remote worker, particularly if where you were working from was quite literally remote, if you were working from somewhere that was a little more obscure, that didn't have a major hub in terms of business or technology, and you were looking for a job and you wanted to work from your rural location, for example, you a few years ago perhaps couldn't be so picky about what kind of job you were going to get. So you didn't have so much bargaining power. But now remote work has exploded and candidates have choice. Workers have choice. If you could be living in the middle of nowhere in somewhere very isolated, very rural, if you have a good internet connection, you can get another job if this job doesn't work out for you. And at that other job, that company will offer you secure, stable employment. And I think companies they're becoming a lot more aware of this. If you want to compete, if you want the best people, you have to be in a position to offer that stability and security.
I agree. Yeah. We have another question. Can we offer benefits to our team members through Boundless? If so, what kind of benefits are those?
Yeah. So benefits, it's such a broad area. We actually published a blog post on benefits in kind last week, I think, and we're just about to publish another one, so that might be worth a look. I'll post the link here before I finish up. Benefits is a very, very broad area. So I'm always interested that I think a lot of people coming from the US will often refer to certain things as benefits that us in Europe just view as a statutory right. So in Europe, most countries, you will get paid time off, it is a statutory minimum, and it varies anywhere from kind of 20 days up to 30 days a year in different countries, on top of public holidays. And we have a lot more public holidays in most European countries versus most of the US. So paid time off wouldn't be viewed as a benefit as such. Then there are things like certain social taxes and social contributions. There may be statutory health insurance payments, for example. Again, most people in Europe wouldn't view that as a benefit. It's a statutory right. It's something, it's a base level. If you want to be an employer, you must make those payments. There's no way around that, no way of hiding from that as an employer. What I would refer to as benefits are the things beyond that, where an employer chooses to go beyond the statutory minimums and give extra things to their workers. And the things, it varies. There are kind of cultural and social norms in different countries that impact people's expectations of what they'd like to see as benefits. The ones you'll most commonly see are health insurance and pensions. But say, for example, in the UK, where you have a full free national healthcare system, health insurance is not so important as it is somewhere like Ireland, where some of our healthcare is free, but a lot of it's not. And a lot of people, if you're in a pretty stable job, you will have private health insurance. Pensions health insurance and pensions are the ones that I would view as kind of the basics that you'll see most commonly expected. There is a requirement, a statutory requirement, to make access to a pension available in many, many countries. It isn't always required that the employer would contribute to that financially. So if you did want to, that would be an extra benefit. So Boundless can certainly support pension payments in all of the countries that we're live for. We're working on health insurance. We're talking to a number of prospective partners in that space. What we can do, and I've certainly operated this way in the past, is where a company wants to make a contribution to someone to support their health insurance, we can take care of that and make sure it's all processed through payroll and taxes are filed in the appropriate way for that type of payment. So that's a way that many companies will manage those kind of benefits, is through payment of a stipend of sorts, and we're fully set up to support that. Other things that employers will often want to look at are perks. So these might be special deals or offers, or maybe giving people contributions towards food or different wellness packages. We can certainly support that kind of thing where the payment is through a stipend, and we are currently looking at some partners that we may work with in that space, where we'll be able to offer very specific perks packages to our customers. So yeah, very, very open to all of that. And we're always really interested to hear from people as well, to hear about what types of perks and benefits they would like to offer to their teams, so that we can make sure that we're heading in the right direction and providing what people really want.
Right. Thanks. I think that answers the question.
Sorry, June, just to mention as well, my colleague Irina has posted the link to the article about benefits in kind that I mentioned there a moment ago in the chat window.
Very good. There's a question from Joao. How does Boundless select the countries in which it provides support to client? I noted that Portugal is currently one of those countries. Does that mean that someone from Boundless has expertise in employment and tax laws in that country?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have taken a couple of angles of looking at which countries we will support and when. Countries take a widely varying amount of time, effort, work, and money to get set up in. So it's not, it's not a case of starting work on 10 countries on day one and 3 months in, all 10 countries are set up. Unfortunately, it's not so straightforward. We're working on, right now we have 5 live and we have 11 that we're currently working on simultaneously, 11 additional to the 5. So we'll be live for 16 territories at the end of this year. And how we've chosen those territories is we took a look, we looked at the data for a number of companies that had distributed teams, and we looked at where people were centered. The thing is, you're dealing with people here. So by their very nature, people live their lives all over the world. And there tends to be a really long tail of countries that people are in. So most customers and prospective customers that we talk with, when they talk us through where their people are, we rarely see an identical list. The UK is very popular. So most companies that we talk with will have some people in the UK. And then after that, it's a real mixed bag. They may have a cluster in a country where we've never spoken to anyone with people in that country before. And then we'll hear of a lot of people in Portugal, Brazil, France, Spain, Germany. There are some countries that come up quite regularly. So we took that look at where people were and where the demand was. And then separate to that, we looked at which were the countries that were more straightforward. So which ones worked as, when we were looking at year one, which ones make sense to be some of the first countries we ticked off the list. And then thirdly, we had to look at speed, so how long that was going to take. And it's, like I say, wildly varying lengths of time for each country. So we're currently working with people, with workers in UK, Ireland, Denmark, Portugal, and Germany. And we have another list of countries coming very, very soon.
All right, sounds good. That does answer the question. And then I have another one from Tania. Do you think there is a massive difference in terms of remuneration if you are a work promoter versus working at the company headquarters, for instance, for same job, same skill sets?
This varies hugely company to company. Different people have very different views on this. I could tell you that at Boundless, the way we look at it is we're headquartered out of Dublin, and I think it's fair to say that everyone is on Dublin salaries, essentially. That was a choice we made early on. We just said, we have our plans and our expectations for what our costs will be for each of the roles that we're hiring for. We're happy for people to live wherever works for them. We don't police people's lifestyles and how they spend their money if they're located in Dublin, where we're headquartered. We don't pay extra to someone who chooses to not have a car, or who chooses to have a car. We don't pay extra to someone who chooses to live on the more expensive side of town. Likewise, we don't look and say, well, you don't have kids, we're cutting your pay. So we take the same approach when we're looking at people that live in other countries. We have a job that needs to be done. We have an expectation in terms of the quality of the work that will be done and the capability of the individual doing that work. And if you match those expectations and you're getting the job done, we'll pay, what we had envisaged as being a fair salary for that work at that level. Other companies do take a very different approach, and there is no right or wrong way of doing this. And in a company's lifetime, they may need to shift this over time. So there's a lot of people have blogged about this and written about this, but you'll find that some companies will have a formula-driven approach where they will apply a formula based on the cost of living in the city or country that the individual is in. And they'll have some kind of a weighting versus their HQ country, for example. Some other companies will just make a call, and when they're advertising roles, they will make a decision based on the geographic parameters for a role they're hiring for. I dare say some companies make a call when someone applies and they see where that person is based. To me, that feels a little unfair, but every company has its own reasons for how and why they do this. And of course, every company's situation is very, very different. Every company is at a different stage in its life cycle. Its funding situation is different. The makeup of its team is different. So yeah, but I would say if you are a senior leader at a company and this is something you haven't given much thought to before, or if your approach has always been that you would use remote work because it's cheaper, I would urge you to have a think about that. Maybe do some reading on different companies' approaches on this. I often say to people, the reasons to go remote and start hiring remotely, I don't think should be about cost. It should be around access to really awesome talent. And it should be around what's best for your business. How do you most effectively grow your business and do really great work? And I think remote is a really great route to that. Looking at remote as a route to cost saving is a very different angle.
Yeah, I think for most companies, at least the emerging ones, the ones that are really making, that are trying to take advantage of remote, what they're leveraging remote for is that now they can get access outside of their city where they are based off, right? You don't have access to within the 300-mile radius, so you can actually, hire anybody from anywhere. And that next best developer might be living somewhere in Portugal, let's just say, right? So that might be it. Yeah, we have one more. We have time for one more question. I have here. Do you assist with the onboarding of the employee?
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, I have some background noise here. I do apologize. Try closing my window there.
No problem. So, do you assist? And you might have touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm gonna read the question. Do you assist on the onboarding of the employee, explaining the setup of Boundless and the company involved in the employee, for example?
Absolutely. Yes, we definitely help with that. So as a customer of Boundless, all you need to do is give us the email address for the worker that you want to hire or the independent contractor that you're converting to a compliant employee. They get an email from us inviting them to set up their profile on Boundless. It's not hard work for them. They don't have a huge amount to do. They record all of their information there, so their tax registration number, their bank account details, their ID is verified through our product using a third-party secure service. And they can manage and maintain all of their personal contact details, bank account details, and so on through there. And then they sign up to their employment agreement through the Boundless platform, and they can ask any questions that they have about the employment agreement. So we help them to understand that. We have people who are experts in the employment regulations and the employment contract for that country. So they can answer all of the questions that the individual may have. Our expectation is that our customer probably has no expertise in that for this particular country. So we can really hold that customer's hand and take care of all of that. So onboarding the employee from the perspective of getting them set up for tax payments, getting them set up to receive their pay into their bank account, helping them to understand the employment agreement and deal with any questions that they might have around any of the clauses in there. We can take care of all of that.
Sounds good. And they can also check their payroll, and if there's any questions that needs to be clarified about what is this fee for, those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Every month when they get their pay slip, they can ask any questions that they might have. And likewise, our customer, people from the HR department or people ops team or general ops team from our customers' company can contact us anytime and ask any questions that they have about the payroll or about employment regulations for that country.
Right. Sounds amazing. I think it really is the future of work. There were some questions in our mentorship program a couple of days ago, whether companies will be going back to the way we were working post-COVID. And I think what will happen in the future is we will have a surge of hybrid companies, and these hybrid companies will start hiring, everywhere. And that's where Boundless is going to be really important, because they need somebody who will be able to assist them with this transition, making things easier, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I keep saying all of these companies that are trying out remote work right now, it's not going to work for all of them, but all of them are going to be really focused on business continuity and risk management after this. And they know they're going to need some team members and some managers who have experience working remotely. And then once they have this need to have some remote team members long term, it's absolutely inevitable that when they start hiring remotely, and then that inevitably leads to cross-border hiring. So yeah, I think it's we're headed there in a big way, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for doing this Ask Me Anything session with